The first sunrise, a hopeful New Year bedtime story. The alarm was a soft, insistent buzz at 4 in the morning. Not harsh, not jarring, but persistent enough to pull consciousness up through the layers of sleep like a hand reaching down into dark water. For a moment, there was only the warmth of the blankets, the weight of the down comforter, the particular stillness that belongs only to the hours before dawn. Outside, the world was holding its breath. Inside the small cabin, the propane heater ticked and hummed, maintaining its steady warmth against the January cold. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke from the fire that had burned down to embers hours ago, and underneath that, the clean scent of pine that seemed to seep through the walls themselves. The protagonist, let's call them Sam, lay still for a moment, eyes closed, listening to the particular quality of silence that meant snow on the ground and stars still bright in the sky. There was a choice to be made, the same choice that presents itself every year on this particular morning. Stay here in this cocoon of warmth and comfort, or honor the promise made to oneself weeks ago when the idea had seemed romantic and meaningful. Get up, climb the trail, watch the first sunrise of the new year from the mountain lookout. Sam's hand emerged from under the covers and silenced the alarm. The cold air touched skin that had been warm, and that small shock of temperature was enough. The decision was made, not with fanfare or determination, but with a quiet acceptance. This was the year's first act of showing up for oneself. The floorboards creaked underfoot, the old wood responding to weight and cold in its own language. Sam moved through the small cabin with the efficiency of someone who had done this before, though not recently. Last year, maybe, or the year before that. The rituals of winter hiking came back easily. Thermal underwear first, pulled on while still shivering slightly. Then wool socks, thick ones, the kind that bunch up a little inside boots but keep toes from going numb. A flannel shirt, soft from many washings. Then another layer, a fleece pullover that smelled faintly of cedar from the closet where it had waited. The winter coat hung by the door, heavy and familiar. Sam shrugged into it, feeling the weight settle on shoulders like an old friend's hand. The pockets were checked by habit. Lip balm, a folded tissue, a granola bar from some previous hike. These small artifacts of other days. Outside the window, nothing had changed. The world was still dark, still quiet, still waiting. But inside, the ritual of preparation had transformed reluctance into something else. Not quite excitement, that was too sharp a word for 4 in the morning, but a gentle anticipation, like the feeling of opening a book you've been meaning to read. Sam moved to the kitchen counter, such as it was really just a narrow strip of butcher block and a 2-burner stove, and began assembling the day's necessities. The backpack first, a small blue one that had traveled many trails, its fabric softened and faded by sun and use. The thermos went in empty. There would be coffee later, made on the mountain, and that was part of the point. The portable camp stove came next, surprisingly light for something so useful, its metal surfaces cool to the touch. A small canister of fuel, checked to make sure it was full. Coffee grounds, measured into a small plastic container the night before. A French press, the miniature kind designed for backpacking, barely bigger than a large mug. Then the mug itself, metal, double-walled with a lid that screwed on tight. It was dented on one side from a tumble out of a pack years ago, but it held heat better than anything else Sam owned. A small bag of snow, yes, actual snow, scooped into a Ziploc bag from the drift by the cabin door. because melting snow on the mountain was part of the ritual, part of the slowness, part of the point. Food seemed irrelevant at this hour, but the body would want something eventually. Another granola bar, a small apple, firm and cold, a handful of almonds in a tiny bag. The headlamp was where it always was, hanging from a hook by the door. Sam clicked it on. Bright LED white light flooded the cabin wall. Clicked it off. The batteries were good. The strap was adjusted to fit over a wool hat. Everything worked. Everything was ready. The boots were last. They sat by the door, already laced from yesterday's wear, the kind of heavy winter hiking boots that look almost cartoonish in their bulk, but make sense the moment you step into deep snow. Sam's feet slid in easily, and the familiar ritual began. Pull the inner laces tight, then the outer ones, then tuck the excess into the tops so nothing would catch on brush. The buckles clicked closed with a satisfying final sound. Standing now, fully dressed, pack on shoulders, Sam paused at the door, one hand on the knob. This was the last moment of warmth, of ease, of the option to choose differently. The heater ticked behind. The cabin glowed softly in the light of a single lamp left on. It would be here when Sam returned. It would be waiting. The door opened. The cold was immediate and absolute. Not painful, but shocking in its completeness, a wall of temperature that made the lungs pull in sharp and deep. The air was so cold it felt almost solid, something to push through rather than breathe. But after that first gasp, the body adjusted. The second breath was easier. The third was almost pleasant. Sam stepped out onto the small porch and pulled the door closed, hearing the latch click into place. The sound seemed very loud in the pre-dawn stillness, and then it was absorbed by the snow and the darkness and the vast quiet of the mountain forest, becoming nothing at all. Above, the stars were still visible, though fainter now, as if someone had turned down their brightness by the smallest degree. The moon had already set. The world existed in that particular quality of light that isn't quite darkness, but isn't yet anything else. The blue hour, photographers called it, when the sky holds onto night, even as it begins to let it go. The snow on the ground was packed and even, marked only by the tracks Sam had made yesterday and the delicate prints of some nocturnal creature. A fox, maybe, or a rabbit? The beam of the headlamp, when clicked on, created a circle of brilliance that made everything outside it seem darker by contrast. Sam adjusted it to a lower setting. Better, the world returned, visible in shades of blue and gray and the particular luminous quality of snow at night. The trailhead began where the gravel driveway ended, marked by a simple wooden post with a carved arrow. Sam had walked past it 100 times, always meaning to go up, always finding reasons not to. But today was different. Today was the first day. Today, the trail was calling in a voice that couldn't be ignored. The first step onto the trail was both an ending and a beginning. Behind, the cabin, warmth, sleep, the old year. Ahead, the mountain, the cold, the sunrise, everything new and unknown. Sam took that first step, then another, and then the rhythm began. Left foot, right foot, the soft crunch of boot on snow. Crunch, crunch, crunch. It was a sound that filled the world, the only sound steady and meditative as a heartbeat. The trail rose gently at first, winding between trees that stood dark and enormous in the half-light. Douglas firs, mostly, their branches heavy with accumulated snow that hadn't fallen yet but would, eventually in soft thuds and whispers. Sam had heard it happen before walking in a quiet forest when suddenly a load of snow would release from a branch high above and come down in a rush of white, startling and beautiful, and gone in an instant. But now everything was still. The trees stood like sentinels, patient and ancient, their trunks disappearing up into darkness. The snow beneath them was shadowed and pristine, marked only by the trail itself, which someone the Park Service probably, or dedicated volunteers had packed down weeks ago. It made the walking easier, this compression, this pathway carved through winter. The headlamp beam moved with Sam's head, sweeping left and right as the trail curved, catching the sparkle of ice crystals on bark, the droop of snow-laden branches, the occasional glimpse of something reflective, a small trail marker, a patch of ice. The rest of the world existed only in peripheral darkness, felt rather than seen. Sam's breath came in steady clouds, visible in the headlamp's glow, then dissipating into the cold air. The body was adjusting now, warming from the inside out as muscles worked and blood pumped. The first few minutes of any winter hike were always the hardest, the shock of cold, the stiffness of joints, the question of whether this was really a good idea. But then something shifted. The body remembered what it was made for. Movement, purpose, the simple act of putting one foot in front of the other. The rhythm of walking became meditative. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth. The pack settled into its place on the shoulders, its weight becoming familiar, almost comforting. This was good, this was right. This was exactly where Sam needed to be. Around, the forest was waking in its own way, though nothing moved and nothing made sound. It was more a quality of presence, a sense of life held in suspension, waiting. Somewhere an owl was probably settling into sleep after a night of hunting. Somewhere a deer was bedded down in a thicket, waiting for the safety of daylight to move. Somewhere the smaller creatures, the mice and voles and shrews, were navigating their own paths under the snow, in tunnels and chambers humans would never see. Sam stopped for a moment, just to listen, clicked off the headlamp. The darkness rushed in, but it wasn't absolute. Eyes adjusted, and the snow itself seemed to glow faintly, reflecting starlight, holding on to some luminescence of its own. The silence was profound. Not empty, but full of waiting, full of potential, full of the particular peace that comes from being truly alone in a wild place. A breath in, a breath out. The headlamp clicked back on, and the walk continued. The trail was winding now, moving deeper into the forest where the trees grew closer together and the snow lay thicker, undisturbed except for the narrow path. Sam's boots broke through the packed surface occasionally, punching down into softer snow beneath, but mostly the trail held firm. There were tracks here, animal tracks, written in snow like messages in an unknown language. The paired prints of a deer, delicate and precise, crossing the trail at an angle and disappearing into the underbrush. The drag step pattern of a snowshoe hare, in a hurry, heading somewhere urgent. And there, more interesting, the neat single line of prints that could only be a fox, each paw placed directly in front of the last, efficient and purposeful. Sam paused to look at them, crouching down for a closer view. The fox had been here recently, maybe an hour ago, maybe less. The edges of the prints were still sharp, not yet softened by wind or the subtle settling of snow. It had been moving with confidence, not hunting, but traveling, heading somewhere specific. There was something comforting about this evidence of other lives, other purposes, other creatures moving through the night on their own important errands. Sam wasn't alone on this mountain, not really, just alone among humans, which was a different thing entirely. Standing again, joints creaking slightly, Sam continued upward. The trail was steeper now, climbing in earnest, and the breathing came harder. Not difficult, but present something to be aware of, to work with. The lungs pulled in the cold air and pushed it out again, warm and full of moisture that crystallized immediately in the cold, adding tiny ice crystals to the scarf pulled up over mouth and nose. The world narrowed to simple things. The next 10 feet of trail, the sound of breathing, the sensation of muscles working, the cold air on exposed skin, the weight of the pack, the rhythm of steps. There was no room for worry here, no space for the anxieties that had filled the previous week's work deadlines and family obligations and the general low-level static of modern life. All of that fell away, left behind at the trailhead like shed skin. Here, there was only this: the mountain, the dark, the cold, the walking. Sam's thoughts began to drift, not in any directed way, but gently, like leaves on a slow current. Memories surfaced without being summoned. Last year, sitting at a desk at midnight, watching fireworks through a window, feeling nothing in particular. The year before that, at a party, surrounded by people and noise and feeling utterly alone. Other New Years, other transitions, some marked and some ignored. But this year was different. This year there was this walk, this mountain, this promise kept to oneself. No resolutions, no grand declarations, no lists of things to change or fix or achieve. Just this quiet act of showing up, of greeting the year with attention and presence. The trail curved sharply, and Sam followed it, boots finding purchase on a section where ice gleamed beneath a dusting of snow. Careful here, slow down. The pace adjusted automatically, body reading the terrain and responding without conscious thought. This was the wisdom of the body, the intelligence of muscle and balance and instinct. Around the curve, the trail opened slightly, and through a gap in the trees, Sam caught the first glimpse of something other than forest, a hint of open space, the suggestion of distance, a view. Not the summit, yet nowhere close, but a reminder that the world extended beyond these trees, that there was something ahead worth moving toward. The forest opened into a small clearing, maybe 20 feet across, where an old rock slide had taken down several trees years ago, and the forest hadn't yet reclaimed the space. The snow here was deeper, undisturbed, and the view opened up slightly toward the valley below. Sam stopped, grateful for the excuse to pause. The pack came off with a shrug of shoulders, set down in the snow with a soft thump. The air was noticeably colder here, away from the shelter of trees, but the exercise had generated enough warmth that it felt good cleansing, clarifying. Down in the valley, scattered lights were visible, tiny and distant. A farmhouse maybe, or a few cabins like Sam's own. People still sleeping or just waking, going about their ordinary mornings. Up here, the world was different. The air was thinner, cleaner, full of silence and space. There was a fallen log at the edge of the clearing, and Sam brushed the snow from a section of it with a gloved hand, then sat. Not for long. The cold would seep through layers soon enough, but for a moment, a pause, a chance to breathe something other than the rhythm of exertion. The stars above were fading more noticeably now. What had been diamond bright was now merely bright, and the sky itself had shifted from black blue to something softer, a deep indigo that suggested the approach of something new. Not dawn, yet not even close, but the first whisper of its possibility. Sam pulled a water bottle from the pack's side pocket and took a careful sip. The water was cold, but not frozen, and it felt good going down, soothing a throat that had been breathing hard, cold air. Another sip, slower. The body needed this, needed fuel and hydration, needed care. Looking back the way they'd come, Sam could see the twin lines of boot prints disappearing into the darkness of the forest, a record of the journey so far. Something about that view was satisfying proof of forward motion, evidence of effort, a tangible line connecting here to there. But the summit was still ahead. The lookout point was still waiting, and the sun, the whole reason for this early rising, this cold walk, this pilgrimage, the sun was still below the horizon, gathering its strength for the day. Sam stood, shouldered the pack again, felt its weight settle into familiar grooves. The cold had indeed started to seep through, making the idea of movement welcome. Time to go, time to continue. The clearing fell away behind, and the forest accepted Sam back into its embrace. The trail steepened here, climbing more aggressively, and Sam's breathing adjusted to match. Not gasping, not struggling, but working the kind of effort that feels good, that reminds the body it's alive and capable. The legs found their rhythm. Push with the back foot, lift with the front, transfer weight, repeat. Over and over, step after step, the mountain giving way 1 foot at a time. The trees were changing. The dense Douglas firs were giving way to something more sparse mountain hemlock, maybe, or alpine fir trees that grew twisted and weather-beaten, shaped by wind and snow and altitude. They looked like survivors, these trees, tough and patient and utterly at home in conditions that would kill softer things. The trail switched back on itself, cutting left where it had been going right, climbing a narrow cut between 2 rock outcroppings. Sam's gloved hands reached out occasionally for balance, touching rough bark and cold stone, feeling the solidity of the mountain itself. The sky was definitely lighter now. Not bright, not even close to bright, but the quality of darkness had changed. Where before it had been opaque, now it was translucent, as if thinning from the inside out. Individual trees were becoming visible without the headlamp, their shapes distinguishing themselves from the general darkness. Sam clicked the headlamp off and walked for a moment in this new half-light. It was enough. The trail was visible, the world was readable, and the stars above were fading into a sky that was shifting from indigo to a paler, softer blue. Another switchback, another section of trail. The breathing was steady now, deep and even, the body fully warm despite the cold air. There was a pleasant tiredness in the legs, the kind that comes from good use, from purposeful effort. This was what the body was made for, not sitting in chairs or staring at screens, but moving through the world, engaging with terrain, responding to challenge. Sam's thoughts had gone quiet, replaced by simple awareness, the sound of boots, the feel of cold air, the sight of the trail unwinding ahead. This was the gift of physical effort. It cleared out the mental clutter, swept away the accumulated debris of daily life, left only the simple fact of existence. In this moment, on this mountain, in this body, a sound broke the silence, the sharp, distant call of a raven, somewhere above and to the left. Just one call, then silence again. But it felt significant somehow, this acknowledgement from another living thing. This proof that Sam wasn't entirely alone after all. The trail leveled out briefly, traversing along the side of the mountain rather than climbing, and Sam used the reprieve to pick up the pace slightly. The legs were grateful for the change, the different muscles being engaged. And ahead, through the thinning trees, something was becoming visible, a change in the texture of darkness, a suggestion of open space. The summit was close now, very close. The trees fell away almost suddenly, and the trail opened onto the lookout point, a wide, flat expanse of rock and snow jutting out from the mountainside like a balcony. The world fell away on three sides, dropping into darkness that was slowly, incrementally, becoming visible as the sky continued its transformation from night toward day. Sam stopped at the edge of the forest, just breathing, just looking. This was it. This was the place. After all that climbing, all that effort, all that cold and dark and determination, this was the reward. The lookout was maybe 30 feet across, kidney-shaped, protected on the uphill side by a twisted, ancient pine that looked like it had been carved by wind into a permanent state of leaning away from the prevailing weather. On the downhill side, the ground simply ended, dropping away into space and distance. Sam walked slowly to the edge, careful of footing, and looked out. The view was stunning even in this pre-dawn light. Mountain ranges layered themselves into the distance, each one a slightly paler shade of blue than the last, creating a sense of depth that seemed to go on forever. The valley below was a dark pool, still holding on to night, but the ridge lines were beginning to separate themselves from the sky, defining themselves, claiming their shapes. This was why people climbed mountains, not for conquest or achievement or Instagram photos, but for this sense of being above things, apart from things, able to see patterns and connections that were invisible from below. Up here, the scale of the world became obvious. Down there, all the human concerns and worries and dramas up here, they looked very small indeed. Sam chose a spot near the twisted pine, where a flat section of rock had been swept mostly clear of snow by wind. The pack came off and was set down carefully, and Sam pulled out the small insulated pad that would provide a barrier between body and cold stone. It unrolled with a soft crackle, and Sam sat, then stood, then rearranged, then sat again, settling in. The cold was more noticeable here, out of the shelter of trees, exposed to the open air. But Sam was dressed for it, and the exertion of the climb had built up a reserve of warmth that would last for a while. Long enough, certainly, for what came next. The sky was brightening moment by moment, the change so subtle that it was impossible to see it happening, yet obvious when compared to 5 minutes ago. The blue was paler now, gentler, and at the horizon still below the curve of the earth, still hidden, there was the faintest suggestion of something warmer. Not yellow yet, not even close to yellow, but a hint that yellow was coming, a promise in the form of color that hadn't quite arrived. The world was holding its breath the moment before. The pause between night and day, between old and new, between what was and what would be, and Sam was here for it. With cold, stiffened fingers, Sam unpacked the camp stove from the backpack, handling it carefully, methodically. The small stove was a marvel of engineering, barely larger than a coffee mug, weighing almost nothing, yet capable of boiling water even in conditions like these. It had 3 small metal legs that folded out, and Sam set them into the snow, pressing down until the stove was level and stable. The fuel canister came next, a small cylinder of compressed gas. Sam screwed it into the base of the stove with careful precision, feeling the threads catch and tighten. There was a small valve on the stove, currently closed. Sam opened it slightly, hearing the faint hiss of gas, smelling its distinctive petroleum scent, sharp and out of place in this natural setting. The igniter was built into the stove, a small button that, when pressed, would create a spark. Sam pressed it once. Click, nothing. Again, click, nothing. Third time, click. And suddenly there was flame, a perfect circle of blue that roared softly in the quiet dawn, magical and practical all at once. Sam adjusted the valve, reducing the flame slightly, finding the sweet spot between too much and too little. The blue flame danced and flickered, casting a small glow on the snow around it, and the heat was immediately tangible, a small sphere of warmth in the cold air. The pot came next, a small aluminum thing with a folding handle. Sam had filled a plastic bag with snow back at the cabin, and now that snow was emptied into the pot, compact, clean, crystalline. The pot was set on the stove, balanced carefully on the small metal supports, and then the waiting. This was part of the ritual, maybe the most important part. Not rushing, not hurrying, but letting things happen at their own pace. The snow would melt when it melted. The water would boil when it boiled. The sun would rise when it rose. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The snow just sat there, white and solid, reflecting the blue flame beneath it. But then, slowly, the edges began to darken with moisture. A single drop of water formed and ran down the inside of the pot. Then another. The snow was collapsing on itself, losing volume, becoming denser. A soft hissing sound emerged as ice met hot metal, a sound that was deeply satisfying in its simplicity. Sam sat back, watching the pot, watching the sky, watching the slow transformation of the world. The blue hour was ending. The sky was no longer dark, but couldn't yet be called light. It was something in between, something transient and precious. The stars were almost entirely gone now, visible only as the faintest suggestions if you knew where to look. The mountains across the valley were becoming more distinct, their shapes more defined. Individual ridgelines were separating themselves from the general mass, claiming their identities. And at the horizon, that hint of warmth was growing, still not yellow, but a kind of pale amber, a glow that was building slowly, inevitably. Inside the pot, the snow had become slush, then water, and now the water was beginning to move with heat, small currents forming, tiny bubbles appearing at the bottom. The sound changed from a hiss to something softer, a whisper, a promise of the boil to come. Sam pulled out the coffee grounds pre-measured, exactly 2 tablespoons, and the small French press. The press was a beautiful thing, elegant in its simplicity. A glass cylinder, a metal plunger with a mesh filter at the bottom, a lid. It had traveled in a protective sleeve, and Sam removed it carefully, setting it on the flat rock beside the stove. The water in the pot was moving more vigorously now, the bubbles larger and more frequent. Not quite boiling, but close. Sam waited, watching, patient, and then the first true bubble broke the surface, then another, and suddenly the water was in motion, rolling and steaming, and it was time. Sam turned off the stove. The flame disappeared instantly, leaving only the glow of heated metal, and carefully poured the boiling water into the French press, onto the waiting coffee grounds. The bloom was immediate and beautiful. The grounds swelled and rose, releasing their oils and gases, creating a thick, dark foam on the surface. The smell that rose with the steam was intoxicating, rich and earthy and complex, almost absurdly wonderful in this setting. Sam poured until the press was 3/4 full, then set down the pot and placed the lid on the press without pushing the plunger down yet. 4 minutes. The coffee needed 4 minutes to steep, 4 minutes for the water to extract all the flavors and oils and caffeine from the grounds. 4 minutes to wait, to sit, to simply be. And the sky was still changing. The amber glow at the horizon was growing, spreading, warming. It was no longer a hint, but a presence, a band of color that stretched along the entire eastern horizon, maybe 10 degrees of arc, glowing against the paler blue above it. And within that band there were gradations, deep amber at the bottom fading to gold, fading to a peachy pink that blended almost imperceptibly into the blue. It was breathtaking, not in a dramatic, overwhelming way, but in a quiet, profound way, the kind of beauty that made the chest feel full, made the throat tighten slightly, made the eyes want to blink away unexpected moisture that might have been tears or might have just been the cold. Sam checked the phone briefly, not for messages, not for distractions, but just for the time. 4:47. Sunrise was predicted for 5:03, 16 minutes away. 16 minutes until the sun broke the horizon, until the first light of the new year touched the world. The coffee had steeped long enough. Sam's hands, slightly numb despite the gloves, grasped the plunger and pressed it down slowly, steadily, feeling the resistance of the grounds, hearing the soft whisper as the filter pushed coffee and water through while trapping the grounds at the bottom. Perfect. The metal mug came out of the pack, and Sam unscrewed its lid, then poured carefully, watching the dark liquid fill the cup, seeing the steam rise in curls and wisps that were immediately torn apart by the cold air. When the cup was full, Sam screwed the lid back on loosely, leaving a gap for drinking, and wrapped both hands around the mug. The warmth was shocking. Even through gloves, even through the insulated metal, the heat was tangible and wonderful, seeping into cold fingers, radiating up through palms and wrists. Sam held the cup and just absorbed that warmth for a moment, eyes closed, breathing the coffee-scented steam. Then, carefully, Sam raised the cup and took the first sip. Bitter, hot, perfect. The coffee was strong, maybe too strong by normal standards, but exactly right for this moment, this place. It burned going down, a good burn, a warming burn, and Sam could feel it radiating out from the stomach, spreading warmth through the core. Another sip, slower this time, savoring it. The taste was complex hints of chocolate and caramel, an underlying earthiness, a bright acidity that cut through the bitterness. This was good coffee, carefully chosen, carefully made, carefully enjoyed. And the sky continued to lighten. The mountains across the valley were fully visible now, their slopes and ridges clear, their details emerging in the growing light. And something was happening at their peaks. The very highest points were beginning to glow, catching light that hadn't yet reached the valleys below. It was subtle at first, just a slight warmth to the snow at the summits, but it was growing, spreading, a preview of what was coming. Sam sipped coffee and watched, and time seemed to slow down, to become elastic, to stretch out this moment into something that felt infinite. There was nowhere else to be, nothing else to do, no urgency or obligation or demand. Just this, sitting on a mountain, drinking coffee, watching the world wake up. The band of color at the horizon was intensifying now, the amber becoming gold, the gold becoming almost orange. And at its very center, at the point where the sun would rise, There was a concentration of light, a brightness that was still indirect, still hidden behind the curve of the earth, but building, growing, preparing. 5:01. 2 minutes to sunrise. The temperature had dropped even further. This was the coldest moment of the day, the last gasp at night before the sun's warmth began its work. Sam could feel it even through all the layers, a cold that wanted to seep in, to claim ground, to win. But the coffee helped, and the knowledge that warmth was coming helped, and the simple fact of being here, now, in this moment, made the cold seem like part of the experience rather than something to endure. The world was holding its breath. The mountains were silent. Even the wind had died away to nothing, as if nature itself was waiting, watching, ready. 5:02. And then, exactly on schedule, exactly as predicted by algorithms and mathematics and centuries of observation, the first sliver of sun appeared at the horizon. It started as a pinpoint, a brightness almost too intense to look at directly, appearing at the lowest point of the eastern horizon between two distant peaks. Just a dot, just a gleam, but unmistakably the sun, not the glow of the sun, not the suggestion of the sun, but the actual disk itself visible for the first time. The moment felt suspended, crystallized, eternal. Sam sat absolutely still, coffee forgotten in hand, eyes fixed on that point of light, watching as the pinpoint grew into a sliver, the sliver into a crescent, the crescent into a half circle, slowly, inexorably inevitable as time itself. The light that reached the lookout point was still indirect, still ambient, but it was changing by the second. The sky was no longer blue, but a wash of colors, gold and pink and orange and a purple so pale it was almost white. The clouds that Sam hadn't even noticed were their high, thin cirrus clouds, barely visible, were suddenly illuminated from below, their undersides painted brilliant coral and salmon and rose. And the mountains were transforming. The peaks that had been merely glowing were now blazing, their snow catching the direct rays of the sun, while the valleys still slept in shadow. It created a dramatic division, a clear line between day and night, between illumination and darkness, and that line was descending the mountainsides moment by moment, creeping downward like slow-motion water, bringing light to the world. Sam watched the sun continue its rise, the crescent becoming a half circle, the half circle becoming more than half. The intensity of the light was increasing exponentially, and Sam had to pull out sunglasses, dark ones, essential for snow at high altitude, and put them on. Even through the lenses, the sun was brilliant, powerful, warm, and then the sun was fully clear of the horizon, a perfect circle, complete and whole, the first full sunrise of the new year. It hung there, low and large and golden, so much more vivid and present than it ever seemed at midday when it was high and white and taken for granted. The light hit the snow at Sam's feet, and everything changed. What had been blue-gray and shadowed became crystalline, brilliant, almost painfully bright. Every snowflake, every ice crystal, every irregularity in the surface became a prism, catching light and throwing it back, creating a field of diamonds that stretched in all directions. The whole world was glowing, incandescent, alive. Sam turned slowly, taking in the full 360-degree view. The valley below was still in shadow, still dark, but it wouldn't be for long. The light was descending the western slope of the mountains, racing toward the valley floor. The mountains to the north and south were fully lit now, their details sharp and clear in the angled morning light. And behind Sam, Back the way they'd climbed, the forest was waking up, individual trees emerging from the general mass, shadows shortening, color returning to the world. The coffee was still warm in Sam's hands. Another sip, slower now, contemplative. The caffeine was starting to work, sharpening focus, bringing a pleasant alertness. But it was the moment itself that was intoxicating, that was filling Sam with a sensation that felt almost like joy, but was quieter than that, more sustainable. Peace, maybe, or gratitude, or simply the profound satisfaction of being in the right place at the right time, of having followed through on a promise to oneself. There were no grand epiphanies, no lightning bolt moments of clarity, no sudden solutions to life's problems. The sunrise didn't change anything about the challenges waiting back in the regular world, the obligations and difficulties and complications, but somehow that didn't matter. What mattered was this, that the world continued to turn, that the sun continued to rise, that beauty continued to exist even when no one was watching, and that Sam had chosen to be here to witness it. The new year had been greeted properly, quietly, mindfully, with attention and presence and respect. A raven called again, closer this time, and Sam looked up to see the bird circling overhead, black against the brightening sky, riding thermals that were just beginning to form as the sun warmed the air. It called once more, a harsh, joyful sound, and then flew off to the north, disappearing beyond the ridge. Sam sat for a while longer, finishing the coffee, feeling the sun's warmth on face and hands even though the air was still cold. The light was different, now no longer golden but warmer, more yellow, the quality shifting as the sun climbed higher. In another 30 minutes, it would look like ordinary daylight. In an hour, the magic of the golden hour would be gone, replaced by the simple fact of day. But Sam had been here for the transformation, had witnessed the transition, had been present for the moment between. Slowly, reluctantly, Sam began to pack up. The French press was rinsed with snow, the dregs of the coffee scattered on the rock, where birds might find the grounds and wonder at their origin. The mug was rinsed and dried and returned to the pack. The stove was cooled with handfuls of snow pressed against its metal, then folded and packed away. The fuel canister was unscrewed and capped and tucked into its pocket. Every item was returned to its place with care, with attention, with gratitude for its service. The insulated pad was rolled up and strapped to the pack. The pack was shouldered, its weight settling into familiar grooves. Sam stood, stretched, feeling muscles that had stiffened slightly from sitting, feeling the pleasant ache of legs that had climbed and knees that had flexed and a back that had carried weight. One last look at the view, one last moment of standing at the summit, at the lookout point, at the place between earth and sky. The valley below was fully lit now, the shadow line having passed through, and small details were visible. A road, a barn, a creek winding silver through white fields. Life was continuing down there, people waking and starting their days, probably not thinking about mountains or sunrises or the simple act of showing up for oneself. But Sam had done it, had climbed the mountain, had witnessed the first sunrise, had started the year with intention and attention and a kind of quiet ceremony that felt right in a way that fireworks and champagne and countdowns never had. The descent would be easier than the climb it always was. Gravity became an ally rather than an opponent, and the legs that had worked to lift the body would now work to control it, to brake and balance and guide. The cabin was waiting below, warm and welcoming, and Sam would arrive tired and cold and deeply, profoundly satisfied. But not yet. First, the walk down. First, the return journey. First, one step and then another, boots finding the trail, body remembering the way. The trail looked different going down. It always did. The same trees, the same rocks, the same turns and switchbacks, but seen from a different angle, bathed in different light, experienced with a different energy. The forest had fully awakened now, though awakened was perhaps too strong a word. The forest simply was patient and present and utterly itself, unchanged by the sunrise, unimpressed by human attempts to mark time and meaning. Sam's descent was measured, careful. Going downhill required different muscles, different balance. The knees and quads did most of the work now, controlling speed, preventing tumbles. The poles that Sam hadn't bothered with on the way up would have been useful now, but they were back at the cabin, and managing without them was fine. Just a matter of attention and care. The snow crunched differently, going down softer somehow, or maybe that was just perception, the mind finding patterns where none existed. The headlamp had been turned off and tucked away. There was no need for it now in the full daylight. The world was completely visible, completely present, rendered in blues and whites and the deep green of evergreen needles. Sam passed the clearing where the break had been taken on the way up, but didn't stop this time. The body was warm from descent, and stopping would mean cooling down, stiffening up. Better to keep moving, to maintain momentum, to let the rhythm carry forward. The animal tracks were still there in the snow, the deer, the hare, the fox, but they looked different in the daylight, more mundane perhaps, or maybe just more comprehensible. Night lent mystery to everything. Day made things clear. Both were valuable, both were true. Through the denser part of the forest now, where the trees closed in and the trail narrowed, and Sam had to duck under a branch that hadn't been noticeable going up. The light here was filtered, dappled, the sun finding gaps in the canopy and creating spotlights on the snow below. Dust motes or maybe ice crystals floated in those beams of light, tiny particles made visible by illumination, dancing and drifting on currents too subtle to feel. The trail leveled out as it approached the final stretch, and Sam's pace quickened slightly, not rushing but allowing the natural momentum of descent to carry forward. The legs were tired now, truly tired, the kind of tiredness that came from honest work, from effort given willingly toward a worthy goal. It felt good, this tiredness. It felt earned. And then, through the trees ahead, the shape of the cabin became visible. The peaked roof, the stone chimney, the small windows reflecting morning light. It looked like a postcard, like something from a storybook, nestled there among the trees with smoke rising from weight. No, there was no smoke. The fire had gone out hours ago, would need to be rebuilt. But the cabin itself was unchanged, faithful, waiting. Sam emerged from the trailhead onto the packed snow of the driveway and paused, looking back one last time at the trail disappearing into the forest, at the mountain rising beyond, at the path that had been walked and would be walked again someday on some other first morning of some other year. The key was in a pocket, cold metal against cold fingers. The door unlocked with a familiar click, and Sam pushed it open and stepped inside. The cabin was cold, not as cold as outside, but cold enough that breath was still visible. The heater had maintained a baseline warmth, but it was minimal, just enough to keep pipes from freezing. Sam adjusted it higher and listened to it tick and hum as it ramped up, beginning the work of warming the space. The pack came off with a sigh of relief, shoulders grateful to be free of weight. Boots were unlaced and removed, left by the door to dry. The layers came off one by one, coat, fleece, flannel, until Sam was down to the base layers and the cabin was starting to feel warm again. The clock on the wall, analog with actual hands, no digital anything, showed 6:45. The whole journey had taken less than 3 hours, but it felt both longer and shorter than that. Time moved differently on mountains, expanded and contracted based on attention and effort and the quality of experience. Sam moved to the window and looked out at the forest, at the morning light filtering through trees, at the mountain visible in the distance. Up there, at the summit, the lookout point was empty now, returned to the solitude of wild places. The sun was climbing higher, ordinary now, its dramatic entrance complete. Life was continuing, the world was turning, and a new year had begun. There would be time for sleep soon. The body was ready for it. The kind of deep, dreamless sleep that comes after physical exertion and profound satisfaction. But first a cup of tea, perhaps, or more coffee, or just sitting by the window and letting the warmth seep back into bones and muscles. The year stretched out ahead, full of unknowns and challenges and the ordinary complications of human life. There would be difficulties and disappointments, surely. There would be moments of doubt and frustration. That was the nature of time, of life, of being human. But there would also be moments like this morning, moments of beauty and connection, and the simple satisfaction of doing something meaningful, even if that meaning was private and small and witnessed by no one but the self and the mountain and the rising sun. Sam had started the year with intention, with a quiet act of self-care and self-respect. Whatever else happened, that would remain true. The first sunrise had been witnessed. The promise had been kept. And outside the window, the mountain stood unchanged and patient, already preparing for next year, for the next person who would climb the trail in darkness and cold, seeking that moment of transformation, that first light, that quiet beginning. The world turned. The sun rose. The year began. And Sam, tired and warm and deeply content, was ready for whatever came next. If this story resonated with you, if it brought you some measure of peace or helped you find rest on this night, please consider showing your support with a like. Subscribe to Deep Sleep Stories Hub for more quiet journeys, more restful nights, and more stories crafted with care to help you find the deep, restorative sleep you deserve. Thank you for listening, and sleep well.